All right, guys, this is the fun part of the class. We're going to try to determine what a wine will taste like without even opening the bottle. So let's go ahead and talk about that wine from Bourgogne called Aligote. We don't really know anything about Aligote or what it tastes like, but we're going to try to find out what it tastes like right now. So we're going to use the 7 secrets that we learned earlier and apply them to our guess. So we know Burgundy is a cool climate region. So I'm going to take a look at our fruit flavor profile chart from earlier, and we can see that it shows us that wines from cool climate regions are going to have citrus fruit flavors. But we don't actually know exactly where in Burgundy this wine is from. The grapes can be sourced from, way up in the north near Chablis or, further down in the south or anywhere in between. So even though Burgundy is a cool climate region, it does start to warm up a bit the further south you go. So I'm just going to say that this wine, might have also some tree fruit and or some stone fruit flavors, but more on the leaner side, leaner than you would find from the moderate section. So I'm going to say lean flavors like, green apple, Granny Smith apple, green pear, underripe pear, white peaches, this sort of thing, as opposed to like the Asian pear, the red delicious apples, or the ripe peaches that you might find in the moderate section. So the only other thing we know about this wine is that it's a 2014 vintage, which actually does tell us a lot about this wine, because since it's 2016 now, it probably doesn't have any oak aging since it's already on the shelf. So if there's no oak aging on this wine, it can't really have any secondary aromas or flavors. So it also won't be a complex wine, which means this wine is just going to be like, one-dimensional, just showing fruit flavors, and that's it. So it'll probably also have a higher level of acidity because of the cool climate, and a lower level of alcohol because those are directly proportional. And I'm going to say this wine is, light to medium bodied because, again, we don't know exactly where in Burgundy this wine comes from. So let's take a look at what the critics have to say about this wine. They say this wine is one of the most energetic wines in the Côte d'Or, good. The grapes were sourced primarily from the vines in the village of Meursault, which is actually a region in the Côte de Beaune, which is our Manhattan area. And they also say this wine is zippy, clean, and fresh, with aromas of green apple and lime on the nose. And that's kind of what we just talked about, flavors of green apple and lime. I mentioned citrus fruit flavors and lean tree and stone fruit flavors. So that's kind of just what we said. And they mentioned that this wine was clean and fresh, which actually indicates a young wine, which then translates to a wine not having any oak aging, which again, we just pointed out. It also says this wine is zippy, so I'm going to take that to mean that this wine has a higher level of acidity, kind of like, when someone squeezes a lemon on your tongue, you get that mouth-watering sensation, which, I guess you can call zippy or zingy or something like that. So we were pretty much in line with the flavor profile of the experts, so that seemed a little too easy. But let's try something a little harder now. So let's go back to the wine list from Danielle and let's pick out one of these crazy expensive wines here, like this one for $600 from Domaine Leflaive. It's a 2009 vintage from Les Pucelles. Let's just check this out and see if we can do the same thing. So let's apply the same secrets as we did earlier. We know this wine comes from a cool climate, Burgundy, but it's not as far up north as Chablis. It's in our Manhattan section, so it's warming up a bit. So what do we think this wine's going to taste like? Well, for the primary fruit flavors, I'm going to go with citrus as well as tree and stone fruit flavors because, like I said, the climate is warming up a bit. So I'm going to say, again, lean tree and stone fruit flavors. Now, we can also look at the vintage. And it's a 2009 vintage, so I'm going to say there is probably some oak aging to this wine because it's already 2016, and if this wine was just a one-dimensional wine, being on the shelf for like 7 years, it might be past its prime by now if it was just a simple wine. So I'm going to say this wine, there was some oak used to make this wine, and then I'm going to say it's French oak because we're still in the cool climate, so we need a more subtle oak option that won't overpower, the delicate flavors of the wine. So we also know this wine is, $600. So that's another indication of oak aging because if it was just a simple wine, just a one-dimensional ready-to-drink wine, it really wouldn't cost that much. And again, because it does have oak aging, it can't really be a light-bodied wine because oak adds some structure to the wine. So I'm going to say this wine is probably medium-bodied. So we haven't actually spoken yet about secondary and tertiary aromas in the wines that have oak aging on them. So let's talk about that now. Secondary aromas come from oak aging and tertiary aromas come from bottle aging. And since this wine has both, it's safe to say that this wine will probably show some characteristics from both categories, like cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and ginger, which you can also call baking spices. And since toast is a characteristic of both oak and bottle aging, I'm going to throw that into the mix as well. This wine can also have some cedarwood aromas from the oak aging, or some nuttiness, or hay, or honey, or mushrooms from the bottle aging. So I'm going to add some honey to the mix and say that this wine has some notes of honey as well. Okay, so let's see what the notes from the winery tell us. So far, so good. The wine has some notes of honeysuckle, some citrus, some white orchard fruit. Pear in particular is medium-bodied, long finish, and a classy wine. So let's take a look here at the critics' notes, because you have wine and spirits, you have wine enthusiast, wine advocate, wine spectator. So these are our heavy hitters. So let's go ahead and see, what they have to say about this wine. And they basically said the wine has some delicate florals, some lemon vying with ripe peach, some notes of toast, ripe stone fruit and honey, stone fruit and spice, peach and pear, and some oak spice. So how did we match up? Well, except for the florals, I'm saying we were pretty much spot on, my friends. We were pretty much spot on. So when it comes to us who's never tasted this wine, and all the 7 critics who have, that's really amazing. And that's the wine code in action. It can help you identify, what a $6 bottle of wine tastes like, or a $600 bottle of wine. And that's some serious power, my friends. Product knowledge paired with this formula of how to determine what a wine will taste like without even opening the bottle. That's amazing. You now have the same information that all of the wine experts out there have. So use this information, play around with it, check out some wine lists online, test yourself, impress your friends. But more importantly, you now have the tools to pick out great wines with confidence every time.